All right, Rach. Well, good morning, good afternoon. Rachel, can you see, are we there? Are we going live?
Yeah, I think we are. I'll make sure.
Okay, awesome. Well, let me do some housekeeping stuff real quick. All this.
Welcome to all of our attendees just tuning in. Thanks for being here with us today.
All right. And can you see the PowerPoint and everything? We good to go there?
Yeah, we are.
Awesome. Well, like I said, good afternoon, guys. Marcus Dillon here, joined by Rachel Dillon. Just wanted to kind of educate y'all on a lot of the questions we're getting from clients on the PPP funds that they're starting to receive or hopefully will receive in the next few days. I know that the second round is opening. 2 seconds, Rach. Let me go ahead and update this real quick on my side. And then we'll get started. I think we're getting better at these, hopefully.
Hopefully.
Yeah. Had to upgrade our internet today just because that's what it seems like everybody's doing now. But yeah, wanted to kick off. So getting a ton of questions on PPP and then obviously what the paper trail for that would look like. Our all-inclusive clients that we serve, obviously, we're going to be doing a lot of that work and coordinating with their in-house person or the business owner themselves. But definitely for clients that aren't on all-inclusive or any type of our response engagement, which we've gotten really good feedback from, definitely want to leave y'all with the right tools and the right just kind of resources to track some of this stuff yourself, and then just share additional guidance with what we're seeing come down in our consulting group as we continue to learn more and get additional guidance. So first off, let's go ahead and click into this. See if y'all, so kicking it off, PPP, more funds were allocated last week. What we saw, the SBA window opened up on Monday, and just like many assumed would happen, the SBA website began to slow or crash. Some other things that came out of that really caught some of our banker friends off guard was the fact that they started throttling applications or setting a pace at which no one bank or no one lending source could flood the SBA system with robotic entry or anything like that. So a lot of that caught people by surprise. So when the SBA window opened on Monday, it crashed. That made national news. And then hearing from our banker friends, they've tried to set a good team around consistently getting those applications in throughout the day, throughout the night. But it's still a hard go, because after the banks have met their maximum number of SBA applications, it stops. It pauses them and forces them to not enter any more data until the next hour begins. So bankers are growing frustrated with this second round. So hopefully any of you that are out there that don't already have confirmation that you've received an SBA number or have already been funded in the previous round, hold tight. Hopefully you know that your banker is working for you, so you get that in this round of PPP. What we saw in the last few weeks, people grew frustrated with the first round of PPP coming and going. A lot of the big banks did not react as fast as we would have thought. And their numbers, as far as the number of approved applications, just weren't there, which forced people to go to other lending sources. And what we've shared there, a few of our clients have put in multiple applications with not only their bank, but other lenders, such as Lendio, Blue Vine, actually, yeah, it's Blue Vine, not Blue Line. There's a small typo there. PayPal, Intuit. So those are some non-traditional lending sources. If you wanted to go out and put a second or third application in, I think you have every right to do that. But please, once you get your SBA funding, your number approval from one of those sources, immediately go and withdraw your application with the other bank or the other lending source. We don't want anything to happen that jeopardizes your previous SBA number, previous funding. So definitely help your banker out or whoever that lending partner is to make sure that you do withdraw that application and that they're not spending their time inputting your data and then getting it rejected because you already have an SBA number. So I know that happened a few cases that we've heard of this week. So just be a pal, I guess, to that bank and do them a solid. So moving along, I guess, Rachel, you want to run that poll or I guess.
Yeah, we can do the first polling question.
Okay. Let's go ahead and do that. And then let me know when you see it.
All right, it's up.
All right.
So where are you in the PPP process? Have you received your confirmation number, but not received your funds? Do you have funds? Or do you already have funds and in use?
So we'll give folks a little bit more time there, and then we'll close it. All right, we'll do 3, 2, 1. All right, and then we'll end that. And then I'll share those results. Can you see that, Rachel?
I can.
All right, if you want to share those results for us, just because they don't show up on the video.
Yeah, so we have about 40% of our attendees that have a confirmation number and are waiting on their funds. About 30% have received them, and about 30% have received and they have their funds are being put to use already.
Awesome. So, okay. So it seems like everybody that answered at least are actually through the application process and either have a confirmation number or funds received. So that's awesome. And that's probably why you're on this webinar, wanting some guidance on what documents to retain and create your paper trail, and just really how do you handle those funds that you receive. So we'll jump right into that. Thanks for doing that poll, Rachel, and we'll kind of go right over. So what we've seen and what we've kind of recommended to folks as soon as they get funding from the bank or the lending source that they've received the PPP from is to open up a separate bank account. And there are a few reasons to do that. One, just like when you started the business, it keeps it so much cleaner to keep those funds separate and not commingled. We believe that will help on the back end whenever you do apply for forgiveness in the next few months. Additional guidance is coming out on the forgiveness process that will be done with both the SBA and your bank. So be looking for a lot more resources to come out there. But we've always recommended from the very beginning to open up a separate bank account. That way we can track easily that deposit or transfer coming in to that account, and then from there make transfers to reimburse your operating account or your payroll account for the approved payroll cost or the other costs that are incurred that are allowed for by the PPP program. So some recommendations there on that bank account. Definitely make sure you set that new bank account up where your other operating account is or your payroll account is. We had a situation earlier this week where a client got funded at one bank that they had an account with or relationship, but every other account was at another larger bank. So we made the call with that client to go ahead and transfer the PPP funds to a new account at the larger bank, because it's just going to be easier to do these transfers as approved costs come up over the next few weeks. And so, one, you want to make sure that there's no fees involved. Really think of this as a temporary account that will not live beyond PPP forgiveness. And that's usually just our easiest and cleanest approach. So I think, Rachel, you had a separate polling question here as well that we'll go ahead and ask folks. And I'll go ahead and start that poll. That way you can just see, or we can get some feedback on what you intend to do. Rachel, can you see the poll?
Yeah, so have you guys set up a separate bank account with online transfers, easy online transfers to your operating account? Yes, not yet, or you really don't want to have another bank account?
All right, we'll give folks a little bit more time. And I understand, having another bank account is a pain in the butt. We just think that it'll be a little bit easier, just like getting another loan is a pain in the butt. I think view it that way. But we'll go ahead and share these results. Let me go ahead and end the polling and then share those results. So Rachel, if you'll share what those results are, and we can talk.
Yeah. So looking at yes, about 38% have already set up their new bank account for those funds. 31% not yet, and that might just be because you haven't received those funds yet. And about 30% not wanting another bank account, which Marcus can speak into. We completely understand not wanting it, but we really do feel that there is a need to have it.
So I'm going to go ahead and stop those share results, and then we'll go ahead and move along to the next one. So kind of like Rachel said, we realize that it's just one more thing to open up that separate bank account, but we do believe that it will be a much cleaner process. So looking at the SBA's response, obviously the first round of funding has kind of come and gone. Everybody's seen the news with the big names, the public companies, the private equity firms that got money that we really didn't agree with probably as a society overall. Those people still employ a lot of folks, and that's what the PPP was designed to do. So a lot of those companies that didn't look so good have given back those funds because they have other lending sources or other access to capital. The SBA did come out and kind of clarify, I don't know, as a threat, I guess you could say, but any PPP loan over $2 million will be audited. So just FYI there, if that is your situation. We don't have too many of those over $2 million, obviously. But then the other thing to keep in mind is that the SBA has said that the statute of limitations for auditing any PPP loan will be 7 years. And so just know that that's a really long time. The IRS is 3, and then they can go up to 7 on statute of limitations for audits if there's fraud involved. So the SBA is taking the 7-year approach. Which if you're an in-house bookkeeper or accountant for one of our clients, or you intend to sell the business or something in the near future, just know that what you could be doing today is helping out the person that follows you in your role. So if you're planning to retire in the next year or so, congrats. Maybe this whole COVID response has made you rethink retirement or gotten you that much more excited toward it. But that's why record keeping is going to be huge right now, and following these kind of just general recommendations and assuming that the SBA is going to audit your loan. That's the worst case scenario, and that's the best advice we can give you. I think that's the main thing to take away, is that who knows if they'll open those audits up to more people after a few years. But anybody over 2 million, they've come out publicly and said there will be an audit done, and just wanted you to know that 7 years is their time frame on statute of limitations on these PPP loans. And I think that applies to any SBA loan, including the EIDL or anything as well. So if you made a false statement on your PPP application, and they can look into that. So just a little bit of guidance there that we've seen over the last few weeks. But really talking about just the nature of the expenses. So your PPP was based on your underlying payroll cost. And those payroll costs are the SBA defined payroll expense, which we know does not include the employer portion of payroll taxes. And so, and as well as federal unemployment taxes. So whenever you did your application, if we assisted with that, you knew it was your gross wages up to $100,000 annualized for certain employees or owners, your local tax, which would be TWC in Texas for state unemployment, any medical or insurance benefits that were the employer portion, and then what's the other one? Retirement benefits, the employer portion, the employer match. So if you take that same definition of approved payroll cost, that's what's going to be factored in on the forgiveness as well. So whenever we hear folks say, I'm just going to attach my payroll processing company to the new PPP account and have them withdraw all the funds for this next payroll run, that whatever's being withdrawn is not going to be all forgiven in that situation, because whenever your payroll processor impounds those funds, it also impounds funds for payroll taxes. So that's one of the reasons why you would not want to attach, obviously, the PPP funds just to go into your payroll account, or redo your payroll processing to withdraw payroll out of that account. So, and then the other thing is it's just a temporary account in nature. If you change it now, you're gonna have to change it again. And the fact that your payroll runs line up and need that exact amount of funds is probably not likely. So that's why we recommend transfers. Much like you worked with your payroll processor or our team on the front end to calculate your approved PPP cost, you're gonna do that same amount for the forgiveness piece. So those same PPP, SBA reports that you ran out of ADP, Paychecks, whoever, Gusto, whoever your payroll processor is, those will also be instrumental in the forgiveness aspect as well. So a few things there are the $100,000 annualized, that's come up quite a bit. So over the 8-week period, it actually factors out to $48 and somewhere between 7 and 8 cents per hour. So 48.07, 48.08, depending on what you want to take as far as the rounding error. Per hour is the maximum amount that can be paid with forgiveness. That equals out to $100,000 annualized salary, and that has to be applied at each date over the 8-week period to maximize forgiveness. So that's a total aggregate of $15,385 paid to any one person. That's the max over the 8-week period. And so that might, kind of me nerding out over here as far as the working it all out, but that's the guidance that we've been giving folks. So you don't want to go over that 100,000 if you can control it, just because that immediately reduces the forgiveness piece as far as the calculation. So on the second point, just confirm that the expense amount in nature is qualified. That's where we're going to calculate it and confirm guidelines that the expense is allowable. So majority of PPP was designed to be payroll costs. To maximize forgiveness, 75% should be used for payroll expenses. The other 25% forgivable can be used for other. If possible, we're recommending that more than 75% be allowed for payroll, just because that's what it was always designed to do. That's how you applied for that amount. That's the nature of this program. So if you can use more than 75% for payroll, great. That's going to be what your best bet is. And if you can track that per pay date, per payroll range, that's the next step. So we'll go ahead and jump in. So questions have come up on why we recommend the separate bank account and how those transfers work. So transferring after you run a payroll that has paid dates after the 8-week funding period. So folks that are getting that got funded on Thursday and their pay date was Friday probably had no approved payroll in that pay date because their pay range as far as the dates worked were probably previous to the funding date. So the fact that you can just say, oh, I pay myself at the end of the month on the 30th, and that's for the previous date range of April 1st through the 15th. You've got a 2-week holdback, which is pretty extreme. None of those dates occurred after the funding date, so none of those would be included in your forgivable calculation. We're still going to seek guidance. We know that some additional stuff has to come out from SBA and from the banks as far as the forgivable piece. But we're pretty certain that incurred is after the funding date. So on those payroll runs, you may have to initiate a pay date within the 8 weeks near the end of it to approve the full 8 weeks. But we're also waiting on guidance from SBA as far as it relates to payroll that maybe the date or the hours were incurred during the 8-week period, but the actual date, the check didn't clear the bank until a few days or a week after that 8-week period. We believe that's going to be the case, that's going to be fine, and that they're going to hold true to the incurred piece for this 8-week period. So that also factors into your rent. Obviously, folks paid April rent on April 1st. You can't reimburse yourself for all of the April rent. It would only be the few days that occurred after the funding date, and then the same with utilities. So really what we're not overcomplicate things, what we're telling people right now is to create a folder on your server or your desktop, OneDrive, whatever you use for your document retention. Go ahead and create a PPP forgiveness folder. Within that folder, create April, May, and June as far as months folders. And then we're recommending that you retain receipts or statements and drag and drop those into the appropriate month folder. So you are starting to build out your record keeping requirements. Once you've kind of come up with the costs incurred for that month or that time period, we're recommending transfers be done less frequently. So maybe once a month, every couple of weeks, if you've got payroll every couple of weeks. That way that loan balance, it's truly being seen as almost like a line of credit or a draw, and you're just moving amounts over that are approved. Maybe you've talked with our team about, hey, is this an approved utility? And then you've added that up for the whole month to transfer that at one time. So I know we're getting a lot of questions on that. And I know that a lot of people are just wanting to, shoot from the hip and move over a couple $100, $300 here and there. If your cash flow allows you to do just bigger chunks of transfers, that's what we're going to recommend. So how are we doing on time, Rachel?
Doing good. Keep going.
So we'll go ahead and move ahead. I think there's one more point here before the next question. So talk about save receipts and invoices, transfer confirmations, everything you save it digitally. Hopefully not many of you are saving shoebox receipts anymore. If you're an all-inclusive client and you use Receipt Bank, that's a great tool as well. So some type of scanning and documentation retention is what we're recommending at this time. And it's not really for your sake, but maybe, like I said earlier, maybe it's for the person you're going to train in 3 years when you retire and the SBA comes calling in 5. And that's the thing. You just want to build out your document retention now, assuming that you will be audited. That's obviously the worst case scenario. And I would hate for any client not to have the right amount of documentation and then their forgiveness be impacted. And so just do everything you can, save every receipt for every utility. The approved utilities are obviously electricity, gas, water, telephone, and internet. And so we've had a few questions on telephone. Does that include cell phones? I think as long as you can state the business purpose for your entire cell phone bill, like if they see kids or anything on those cell phone bills and you've tried to get forgiveness, that might be a catch. I know we have some clients who don't have landlines anymore, kind of like we personally don't have landlines, and they use their cell phone for the business. In that situation, I would kind of lean on that is a business expense more so. So do everything you can there. If you pay rent, make sure that you've got a copy of your current lease agreement that is covered by this, and that lease agreement was in place, that contract was in place prior to February 15th. Go ahead.
Yeah, let's do 2 quick questions. The first one, is CAM part of the rent that's
Correct.
allowable?
Yeah. That's where I was going with that. So if you're a triple net lease and you pay CAM, that's going to be part of your rent. That's where it's going to cover so many of your utility costs that you may pay out of pocket. Just make sure that your CAM or your CAM calculation, make sure that you've got a copy of that ties into the expenses for the month or expenses for the year that we're seeking forgiveness on, that we're paying the PPP funds with.
Okay, and then one more real quick. Transportation. Is transportation allowable in this?
It's a situation by situation. The only people that I've seen where transportation is allowed is Schedule C, sole proprietors. And even that, before I answer yes, there's going to be additional guidance that's necessary. Rachel, whoever that is, if they want to reach out, after this, we can kind of look at it. And, but there is going to be a ton of documentation, mileage logs, everything like that, to make sure that any reimbursed transportation is truly included for a Schedule C PPP loan recipient.
Okay.
All right. Well, that brings us to the next poll. And I think Rachel threw in a fun one here, so we'll launch this one real quick. Turned out to be a nice day after the crazy rain that we had last night. And let me go ahead and launch that. Rachel, can you see that?
Yeah, so just want to make sure everybody's still awake and with us. Thinking about probably what most of us would have been starting to think about, summer plans. So this year, since summer plans are probably different, what are you planning for? Are you planning to try to make up lost time at work? Are you thinking about new possibilities of staying closer to home for vacation, or maybe just traveling, but maybe only to see family or very close friends?
Yeah. Give people a few seconds to finish that. This has been my sad story all week long. Rachel and I were actually supposed to be in Cabo this weekend or this week, and things changed, right? So that's impacted not only y'all's vacation plans, but ours. We always take kind of a mid-spring trip just to recap what went on in the business the previous few weeks, and just kind of come back recharged. But obviously that's changed this year. So Cabo is, I guess it'll be there after all this is done, and we can visit then. So, all right, I'm going to share these results. Rachel, can you see those?
Oh man, we're split a third. So some people are going to try to make up lost time at work that might be wanting to or needing to. About a third of us are looking at what can we do closer to home, and a third probably want to get out to see family that they haven't been able to see during quarantine.
Awesome. Okay, well, cool. I'm gonna stop sharing those results, and we'll just jump right in to some of the, I guess, the meat of it. As some of y'all know, we have a variety of friends that are in the banking industry. I worked in the banking world. A lot of our team member spouses work in the banking world. So guys that we know and trust, we've been talking to throughout this whole process. One of those guys is Greg Martin from BB&T up in College Station. Greg and I have done some shared events before. We kind of believe in a lot of the same stuff. And Greg and I, we've kind of put together our heads just to be a better resource for our clients. So, but Greg was fortunate enough to kind of share with me some of his frequently asked questions that he's been getting from his client base, and we kind of just share all the time. So these are where this is coming from. Greg's been a great resource for us, as well as our other banking friends. But Rachel, you want to go ahead and kind of speak into that first question, and I'll kind of go through the three-pronged test.
Yeah, so one of the questions that we've been getting, as well as that Greg has been seeing, how will my loan forgiveness be calculated?
Yeah, so let me go ahead. So these are the rules, right? It's a three-pronged test that the SBA has laid out. We know that additional guidance will come, and everything. If you've seen our calculators that we're trying to keep up with, we know that additional things may change, just like things change in the application process. We hope not. We just hope things will be clarified. So I'm going to jump in real quick, and Rachel, I'm going to kind of share with the folks our. Can you see that?
I can see it.
Okay. So this is these are the calculators that obviously our team and our consulting team has put together to kind of help aid us as a tool for our all-inclusive clients, and then clients that have engaged us to help them throughout this process. I think where we're at as a team, Rachel, and you can kind of correct me on this, but as far as our available engagements at this time, we're currently on a wait list, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So I think what we're willing to do to our annual only client base and any other members of the community who would like this resource, we're willing to share that with you. We will not keep up to date with it for you after it's shared. So, but let Rachel know if you'd like access to this. We're happy to share it. This is what our team is using on our side for clients that have engaged us. And then for that wait list that we've kind of had, just because our team, we just have limited resources at this time, given the response to all of this. So, but these are our calculators, and I'll flip back to the kind of the rules here. But whenever you're using one of these calculators to kind of keep track of your forgiveness or estimate your forgiveness, make sure that it is taking into account each of the three-pronged tests. So I'm looking at my slide right now, and I'll kind of walk you through. The first one is that 75% of the loan proceeds need to be used to pay qualified payroll expenses. So if you've seen this calculator of ours, that's going to be the 75-25 rule in this calculator. And what that is even if you don't use 100% of the proceeds beyond for payroll costs, you're going to be limited. Let's say you use 30% of those for rent and other utilities and things like that. The maximum amount for forgiveness is 25% up to the payroll piece. So everybody loves algebra. Rachel taught math for 9 years before coming over to DILLON CPA. So but you're just kind of backing into the algebra of what would that 25% forgiven amount be. So on our spreadsheet, we do that there. The other thing is you have to pay your employees at least 75%. What we think you'll have to turn over there are payroll records of whether people's salaries were cut or pay rates were cut. We think that'll be part of the forgiveness application whenever that's done. And then the other thing is the FTE. And those dates I'll show those in a little bit, but kind of a little bit of clarity from the SBA in the last few weeks as far as what is the designation of FTE, full-time equivalent employee. You've got them coming out and saying anything over 30 hours is deemed full-time. So I know that's most people think of that as only like a 75% person, but the SBA is rounding up. So if you're concerned about that, make sure that people are over 30 hours to kind of hit your FTE numbers. Within our worksheet, for anybody that's following along, has this or anything, we have outlined here, for you just to drop in, or our team to rely on ADP, who's our payroll engine on our side, to keep up with that FTE count. And you just want to make sure that whatever your employee number on your PPP application was, that you're factoring into that. So on this spreadsheet, you'll see salaried employees here, hourly employees here, and then it obviously all factors in down to this bottom calculation. So The other piece that's real big is that we went back and kind of spoke into that over $100,000 annualized income exclusion. And you can track that here with any folks that are making over 100,000. If you think about it in the big scheme of things, you were approved for a PPP loan with only up to 100,000. So that's kind of your base. Your PPP loan is your base. It didn't take into account anything you were paid above that 100. So if you haven't adjusted your salary and you're continuing to pay yourself after you receive funds, you're actually taking funds away from others that could receive it. At least that's how the SBA thinks. And they're factoring that into the forgiveness calculation. So all of this fun stuff links over and comes back into the main lead sheet, main guide. And like I said, this is fairly up to date. I think it's up to date through the 22nd is when our team is keeping that up to date as far as new guidance. But you'll see that here, those annualized wages, they're actually being reduced in this scenario for that calculation. So anything when you're looking at this, Rachel, you think that I need to clarify for folks, or just the fact that, hey, we can provide this spreadsheet to them if they want to play around with it? Obviously, if they're a part of our all-inclusive offering or one of our response engagements, we're going to help them maintain this. Anything else you'd like me to add at this time?
Yeah, there's a couple clarification questions that kind of go along with this. FTE, a question that came in, FTE was not on the original application. They believe that they submitted like an average employee count.
Yeah, and so it said number of employees. And so that's where the forgiveness might be more work than the application is. And so they're going to verify with what you put on your application as far as number of employees, that at that time it was based on ACA, and SBA has come out and kind of clarified this piece. The ACA defines full-time equivalents based on 30-hour increments. DOL is a little bit different. So, but whatever you put on your application, that's what's going to be confirmed during the forgiveness piece. And that's what you're going to be needing to support as well. So, but yeah, it didn't say FTE. I agree on that application. It said number of
yeah, next clarification, commission-based employees. If they're using PPP funds, how will they make sure the commission-based passes the 3-prong test?
I think for that, it's really if they're commission-based and are they under 100,000 is the main thing. Most folks that are commission-based are going to be, I would think, full-time equivalent, because they're kind of their salary for the most part. They work a full work schedule, and that's just your compensation agreement with them. So yeah, as long as you're considering them an FTE, a full time, and they're obviously putting in the hours, then I would lean on the fact that they were a full one as far as your FTE count.
Okay, one more. Actually, probably two more. Do employees have to be the same people, the same humans that were included on the original application?
Man, I think whoever asked that question is jumping ahead quite a bit. That's actually one of our questions, and the answer is no. It does not have to be the same employee. That's one of our Q&A questions. We know that things change and employees come and go, team members. So it does not have to be that exact employee. It can be somebody that you've added back, potentially anybody different before June 30th.
Okay, and then one more right now, and then if any more come in, we'll continue to answer them in a minute. For the $100,000 limit, that would be in the forgivable. So you could still pay someone out of your regular payroll or operating and not reimburse that amount over.
Not necessarily. So, that is not what we see. We see that the people that raised their hand and applied for these PPP funds were in need of funding to make payroll. And so the fact that you're continuing to pay someone what the SBA deemed as above, not, I hate to say high, but $100,000, above 100,000, that threshold that they've set, it's almost like they're penalizing you in your whole forgiveness calculation. So our recommendation across the board is that any of our folks that receive PPP funds, if the shareholder, officer, or whoever is making 100,000 can reduce their wages for this 8-week period to be an aggregate of 15,385, just so we can maximize forgiveness on the back end of that. That's been our recommendation. You good there?
All right. Yep.
All right. And I know, so Rachel, you usually send this out in the video and all that good stuff. So I think, this slide has a lot of meat on it. And as far as dates and stuff too, and we're going to link up to resources where this is coming from as far as the SBA here in a bit too. So moving along, a couple more questions. I think, Rachel, you want to read that first one out?
So question, another frequently asked question, number 2, is this a general requirement that uses only FTEs and dollars to calculate eligibility for loan forgiveness? In another way, do we have to hire the same people we had before the crisis in order to meet the FTE and dollars pay test?
Yeah, and that's kind of whoever had their crystal ball a minute ago, like the answer is no. We know things have changed with COVID response. Maybe someone's moved on, maybe someone's not ready to come back and they're on an extended leave beyond this. You can replenish your FTE numbers or go out and hire new, and it doesn't have to be the same exact person. They're looking at numbers when they do this forgiveness, not people, not individuals. So.
All right. Question number 3. I have not laid off anyone since the beginning and I have paid them out of my cash reserves. Can I use PPP loan to reimburse?
Yeah, and the answer there is no. So, we've gotten this question so much, and it relates to not even that you didn't lay folks off, that, really it looks at that funding, and then that's when your 8-week window starts for your pay range. So like I said in the beginning, most folks have a week kind of to calculate payroll, input the hours, and then there's a waiting period for someone to receive a check based on their pay range. It's those pay range which fall after the funding date, which are critical. So those are hours that were incurred as far as payroll incurred after the funding date in that 8-week period. It does not matter the pay date, or we even had some folks trying to pay retirement, like 2019 profit sharing plan, and then thinking that was incurred in 2019, even though you have extended ability to pay it into 2020. That would not include in the forgiveness as far as what we're seeing. So let's move ahead. A couple more, Rachel.
All right. Number 4, can I use PPP funds to prepay rent, utilities, or to catch up rent or utilities?
Yeah, and that's where you kind of have to look at that, what was incurred in that 8-week window. And you hate to get so legalistic, but if you take the very legalistic approach from the very beginning and say, okay, I funded on April 24th, my rent for 6 days in April could be forgiven in this calculation. All of May could be forgiven. And then after that 8 weeks ends, that's when it stops. So, we just don't know what the forgiveness application looks like on the back end. I think people are maybe just a little bit jaded that the money was easy to get, and they just hope that the forgiveness is just as easy to get on the backside of this. We just know that that's not the case. There's no such thing as easy when someone's giving you tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars with no personal guarantee or anything like that. So I think just being prepared, kind of why we're leading this session today, and so we can speak into stuff like this. Yeah, prepaying of rent and utilities is probably not going to be a good idea.
All right. And number 5, what happens with any funds that are not used? Can we keep them as a loan, or should we return them?
Yeah, and so this is one more reason why we like the separate bank account. So if you've only pulled money from that bank account for approved expenses, and then at the end of all of this, you've got a small amount in there. You still got those funds available. Maybe you've already started back business. Maybe your cash flow pipeline has restarted. So maybe you just don't need those funds, and you can give them back to the bank and not have to worry about them turning into a loan. If you've used those funds for something other than an approved expense, or you just have some left over and you want to use it as a loan, it will flip to a loan at the end of this, which is a 24-month term, 1% interest rate, which is rock solid as far as a loan is concerned. But it's one of those where it truly would convert to a loan. And have a 24-month term, which is it's going to be a pretty big monthly payout for anything that's not forgiven, or if you've used just held on to the funds just as a loan itself. So we know that there's some conversations out there where folks have people on unemployment and they're just going to view it as a loan and not bring their people back to employment. And that's fine. It's just that was not what PPP was originally intended for. You really just are going out to get a loan at that point. So, but like I said earlier, there's a lot of meat on that previous slide, Rachel. Where they can get more information, more guidance on that is from the Treasury and SBA directly. So we talk into that three-prong approach a little bit here. This is a slide from a previous presentation that we just felt it was appropriate to add again here. But definitely that link will take folks out to the most up-to-date guidance that SBA and Treasury are continuing to release on the forgiveness. I think we'll see more guidance, more clarity on the forgiveness piece in the next few weeks after round 2 is complete. And hopefully with folks going back to work, business reopening in the next few weeks, months, there's less need for additional stimulus. I know that everyone's been impacted mostly. I don't know many clients that haven't. So it will be just interesting to see over the next few weeks if additional stimulus does come out. I personally think this is the last round of funding for PPP, and the parameters they've already put in place with the pacing of accounts and things like that, and then now states starting to open back up. I think that this is the last round. So if there's additional funding or additional stimulus, it may not be related to PPP as we've seen it previously. So, but that's where they can go and find that additional information. Here's a copy just of our previous spreadsheet that we already spoke about. And then let's go ahead and do another poll real quick, Rach.
And then we may have 1 or 2 more questions after that.
Then I'm going to share one more resource that we've created in a little bit too. All right, can you see that?
Yeah, so will you implement at least one thing that we have discussed together here today? Yes, I will implement all of the tips suggested. Yes, at least one of the tips to make forgiveness more manageable. Or I really still feel uncertain of how to implement any of the tips mentioned.
We'll give folks a little bit more time to answer that. We took last week off. I don't know how many of y'all have been tracking our weekly webinars or anything like that, but we took last week off just because we didn't think.
Clarify. We took off from hosting a webinar, not from working.
Still looking for a PTO day in there. I don't know when that'll happen, but so anyway, we'll go ahead and close the poll, and then Rachel can share these results.
So yes, about 50% are going to implement all of the tips suggested. Almost 40% will implement at least one of the things that they learned today. And just very few still feel a little bit unsure. It's natural and normal to still feel uncertain because guidance is still coming out. So again, we do have a wait list for helping if you really feel like you need someone to help you navigate through. Our team is helping others, and we are, doing our best and as availability and our human resources as soon as they're available to continue helping. But if you'll just reach out to me and let me know if you would like some assistance going forward.
Awesome. All right, I'm gonna stop those results real quick, and kind of how we've been leaving the last two. Plenty of time for questions. Obviously, I'm gonna share a few more resources real quick. So one of the ways that we just feel that, we have soaked up, not only me, but the whole team, and really try to grab this COVID response by the horns, and just get as much information out there to y'all as possible. We're doing that on our website, is pretty much the best way that you can stay up to date with stuff. Some of the resources are not available on our website just because they are proprietary. But if anybody on one of these webinars, if you're connected to our firm in any way, if you'll request that through Rachel, we're happy to share that with you, even if you're not on our all-inclusive BOSS model or on one of our response engagements, just because of our limitations on resources. We would love to share these with you. One of the resources that's really helpful that was put together by us and our consulting team is these fact sheets. And so real quick, I'm going to share one of those, and it's just the overview of the PPP forgiveness. This came out on April 11th, which feels like months ago now. But it gives you a brief overview of what we've talked about here today, and then just the different guidelines that we've suggested. So this is definitely something that you can pass along to someone on your team, some other business owner, if they have questions. Maybe it's even your banker. We know that banks are trying to stay up to speed with all this as much as they can, and they're learning and working as hard as they can too. So the other really good resource that I'm happy to share with you here is a very intense, scary list of what we've put together kind of as our inventory for our clients, as far as what we're going to try to keep track of and what we're assuming will come up on forgiveness. So let me see. I don't like the way that is. I don't know. Microsoft Office is playing games today, but so this is another resource that with our partnerships we've developed just to try to stay on top of. So these are things to be thinking about as far as when you're gathering data and retaining that. Our best practices is really to develop a file system, a digital file system on your server, on your desktop, to start putting this information in as it becomes available. And then also keeping it in a very easy to follow format. So this is what we think and what we've seen from SBA and from that forgiveness piece. The payroll information, 941s for Q2, Q3 is what are going to be requested. TWC filings, any other local, which that really doesn't apply in our situation mostly. Payroll journal, canceled checks, and that's just the payroll side. So you're going to have to, if you use a payroll processor, ADP, Paychex, Gusto, QuickBooks itself, the better you are on retaining documents on the front end, the better you'll be on the forgiveness aspect. So I think if you don't feel comfortable in those processes now, take some time to learn the resources to navigate those reports and save them. It'll probably be available for you still here after you learn additional guidance clarity, but this is what we're seeing as our recommendations. Also, the employee benefits, make sure that you've got your statements from whoever used Blue Cross Blue Shield, you've taken into account what the employee portion is, so you've calculated and can tie out everything that you were approved for, that you want forgiveness for, and that maybe you transferred along the way. But everything there, as far as employee documentation, the excess compensation, we've tried to make that as easy as possible within our calculator, our spreadsheet. You see there on that last one, bank documentation, copies of bank statements, And this is, you know, we want it as clean as possible for whenever you go to the SBA and your bank for forgiveness. So how awesome would it be to take them a very clean 3 to 4 months of bank statements that just show one deposit in and a few transfers out versus your operating account, which has deposits daily, maybe from your ACH provider or your credit card company. And it shows that, hey, we applied for this PPP loan and we had $500,000 in cash when we started this. Oh, and we've got $500,000 in cash when we ended this. That doesn't look great. So how good would it be just to keep it clean from the beginning and have that into a bank account? So that's what we recommend there. On the other expenses, the rent, utilities, definitely, you know, all of the statements that are in that period. So if you've been funded, you know that April's in there. If you haven't been funded, maybe it's just May, June, July. I don't know, for your 8 weeks. But documentations of your rent, you know, if you're the landlord and the business owner and you don't have a well-documented lease in place, you better get something papered quick. And that way you can show that was in place prior to February 15th. If you need the name of an attorney that we work with on stuff like that, reach out to us. But you just want to make sure that everything is above board. All of your current utilities, all of your current rent, your CAM is well documented if you're going to seek forgiveness on that. On that self-employed information, that's looking at your Schedule C. That's what you're approved on because you don't have wages that are paid on a W-2. So, and that kind of goes back into, see, Rachel, whenever you mentioned earlier the business gas, that's kind of where we're talking to that. So that is only that Schedule C, that self-employed person. And, you know, you cannot have an S corporation, you cannot have a partnership, you cannot have a C corporation and plan to take the gas. And then also it's just learning your accounting system. You know, our folks that are all on QBO or whatever form of accounting, we're going to help you pull your GL, but working with your in-house people, your bookkeeper, whatever, to make sure that you've got all that. And then let me see, the last one is really just that forgiveness calculation. You know, a spreadsheet like ours, happy to share it with you if you don't have some other resource available. But I think that's a pretty intense list whenever we started putting it together and sharing it with clients. But I think that's what's going to be needed on the back end of this as you create a paper trail for ultimate forgiveness. So kind of leaving here today before we open it up for questions, really, we've ended on this the last time too, going to trusted information resources as you seek clarity on stuff. So that's going to be SBA directly. Hopefully you trust us enough. You're on our webinar. So hopefully you come to our webpage and see as we're updating it. Department of the Treasury. If you pay a company to be your HR kind of provider, definitely reach out to them on stuff. Payroll, you know, everybody that's got an ADP account, everybody that's got a Paychex account, Gusto, you've got a rep. Don't feel like you're alone in this. We don't have access to your stuff unless you're on Boss, unless you're on ADP, on our family as a wholesale client. You need to call that rep to help you work through this and make sure that you feel comfortable in that system. And that's if you're a retail client for ADP, Paychex, or Gusto, or whatever service. If you employ a bookkeeper, that's your best point of contact because they see your stuff daily, weekly, monthly, whatever their consistency is to go out with you. We love all of you annual clients, but we may only see you once a year. And so that's where it's like, we are happy to speak into this stuff, but really you're surrounded by a team of people that can also help you. Your banker, your legal, those go without question. So it sounds like everybody that was on this webinar has received an SBA number or funded. Still have conversations with your banker. If you have not been funded yet, they have 10 days to fund that given SBA guidance. So if you haven't brought back or aren't ready to bring back your whole team, make sure that you take full advantage of that full 10 days. I'll tell you, on the first round, 10 days wasn't even an option. You weren't getting it any sooner than that 10 days because the bank was still trying to figure out funding. They were maybe even going over that 10 days, which would look bad on the bank's part. But it's what the SBA was guiding them to do. So having conversations with your banker if you're not funded yet, especially if you're setting up a bank account, make sure that all that can be done prior to that funding. And then legally, if you need a resource to write up a lease agreement or anything like that, that's something that we'd be happy to provide a name of a referral partner on that. So with that, Rach, I think if we've got time for questions, I'll go ahead and stop the share, and then that way you and I are just here.
Yeah, we have a couple more questions, and so one is pertaining to payroll amounts. Can you pay key employees more than their current rate as a thank you for all of the hard work during this time?
I think you can, as long as it's not going to go over that 100,000, obviously, that 15,385 aggregate. But you also have to be ready to prove that out. And so, whether they worked overtime or, they just put in a lot of extra effort, they're going to look at payroll records potentially before the 8-week and after the 8-week. And especially if you're in an audit and you're sitting across from an SBA auditor, you have to explain, why you felt that it was necessary to use PPP funds for this person. The same thing comes around hiring family members and spouses and increasing wages for family members during the 8-week period. Being from rural Fort Bend County and kind of growing up where we did, pigs get fed, hogs get slaughtered. And so if you're adding your children to payroll for the very first time to use PPP funds and they've never been on payroll before, and there's some type of child labor law where they're like 2 years old and you can't, like that's not maybe going to get forgiven at the end of the day. Even though you got initial forgiveness, how bad would it suck to 6 years from now have to pay that back plus penalties and interest after someone audited you? So, just do what's right. I think, if you feel comfortable enough to do something and explain it to a third party, i.e. an auditor, I think you're okay. So.
Okay, and another, this one's more specific, so I'll read it. You may have to pull up your question and answers if you don't get it all. I received my PPP funds on April 24th. If I have a pay period from April 16th through the 30th, check date of May 5th, should I simply ask all employees to return to work and pay all employees what they were previously paid given part-time or full-time status, regardless of hours they actually worked?
Yeah, that's a tough one. That one's probably one that we'll just have to answer offline specifically for that individual, and it looks like they sent it over anonymously. So but anyway, I think that's one that we do after all of this, and hopefully they can get in touch with us. But yeah, just so everybody's clear, the 8-week period begins after your funding date. You almost have to break it down. Obviously, the SBA is giving guidance on that 15,385. They're breaking it down, even if your salary, they're breaking it down by the hour. That 4808 or 4807, whichever way you want to go, is that amount. And so, for these calculations, if you do your paychecks are 80 hours, I think it may be a little more documentation that you have to keep or that you have to speak into, but definitely something like that just clearly needs to be documented. And that doesn't even, this is only the payroll that we're only talking about PPP funds here. You could be getting into a whole nother situation with employment law. If you reduce or not pay an employee or not pay overtime, that is a whole different concern. And we've listened to webinars, we've sat in on chats with employment law attorneys. There is going to be a variety of lawsuits after this in how certain business owners handled themselves during this situation. And so just cover yourself, do what's best by your employee, and make sure that it is all documented. If you're changing pay rates back and forth, make sure that you've got both people that are agreeing to that pay rate change and that it's signed, sealed, and delivered in your file somewhere. So when everybody was all on the same page, that it was an agreement. So, all right. Anything else you got on your side, Rachel?
I think that's it.
All right, guys. Well, thanks so much for allowing us to share. Feel free to come to us with any additional requests you've got. Happy to share these resources. Maybe we'll do another one next week. It depends on what happens between now and then. I don't think we can fly anywhere for PTO or anything. So we'll be around. But let us know how we can help. Until then, y'all take care.